COP28 Dubai live here. 1.5 Media, Innovators Magazine, Allied4Future. I'm with John D Liu, who is the ecosystem restoration camps, communities, longtime friend. I'm so glad you're here. We were in New York together at Climate Week. We were at COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh. You've been on my podcast. And I personally want to do everything I can to help your cause, to work together. I love what you do, and I'm glad to see you here. We're here at the COP asking several messages, but first I'd just like you to introduce yourself. Why are you at the COP? What sessions have you been speaking at? What brought you to this craziness here?
Well, my name's John Liu, as you mentioned, and I'm here because we're at a kind of a inflection point in human civilization, I would say, human history, that a lot of things are collapsing. There are multiple crises together, and I think the psychological impact is quite high on many people. And so there's a tendency toward anxiety and depression, and when I look at the policy and the finance and the science discussions here, it really makes me think they're very theoretical. And we don't have theoretical problems right now. We have massive physical disruptions to Earth ecosystems. And the possibility to lower surface temperatures is there. We can revegetate. And everyone in the world has a possibility to do that. If you look at my films, you'll see many examples of this, and it's basically proven that it works. And we can sequester carbon, we can increase food security, and we can actually lower the tension around the world by engaging those who are most vulnerable in large-scale ecosystem restoration on a planetary scale. So they are the ones who have the most to gain and the least to lose. There's no downside for them to be able to help, for us to help them and for everyone to work together to ensure food security and to ensure that the hydrological cycle is re-regulated and to ensure that biodiversity is protected and increased. And we can do that. So why don't we do that? I would recommend that.
I love it. So get out of the theory, get into the practice, do the things to reduce surface temperatures. Ecosystem restoration camps, what are they, about 60, 70 camps now?
There's 65 camps, but growing, and there will be many more. And we're looking at very specialized ones that we can increase. So in Somalia, there's one which is developing called Dryland Solutions. I think that's one of the best that we're going to have. We're building natural buildings for this. We're working on different ways to infiltrate and retain moisture, but it's mainly to create community-led actions and train, and then have that multiply all over the place. And that's also true for Egypt. We're working in Cameroon, and new ideas in Cameroon and also in Nigeria. So that's all.
We were talking a little bit earlier, and you mentioned kind of the mass migration, exodus from megacities or people living on the fringes. And there's a concept that you kind of introduced. I'd like you to go a little bit deeper on what can we do with these people who are being displaced. You know, there's discussion possibilities, 50 million or more people be displaced, the climate change, climate refugees. How can we help these people?
Well, what the ecosystem restoration communities is working on are prototypes where people who are in need can band together and study. And we saw this earliest in China with the restoration of China's Lus Plateau. So these are ordinary people, often illiterate or semi-literate or very disadvantaged. And when they were brought together, basically it was understood that what they were doing for their livelihoods, cutting trees or planting on the sides of hillsides or free-ranging goats and sheep. All of that was really destructive. So the government came to an understanding that actually they had to stop doing that. But in order for them to stop doing that, they had to have something else to do. So now you have all these people who are displaced by either wars or by climate disruptions or whatever it is, and they need something to do. They need a place to live. They need food. They need security for their families. And the world needs to be able to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And the world needs to protect biodiversity. So they can actually do all these things. And so we're building systems so that they can have communal gardens, which are essentially food forests and botanical sanctuaries. So by training and learning how to identify and protect and propagate and plant out the most endangered species in the region, they become very important people. And when they make food forests and they take the foods and they take it directly to community kitchens, they'll be able to feed themselves. And all surplus food they can prepare for processing for later. So they really create food security and take care of everyone. And that's much better to have these short supply chains than using subsidies for industrial agriculture to bring over food which actually can't even be sold in Europe for animal feed because it's genetically modified or has pesticides and herbicides all over it. So we don't want to feed these people that. We want them to have organic, nutrient-dense, real food. And simultaneously, they're making their community stand up. They're making it possible for them to have dignified lives and do something. And my kind of spiritual understanding of this is that our energy in our bodies is the same energy that flows through the universe everywhere. And so if their energy is misdirected or not directed or blocked and they can't do things, then that's terrible for them as individuals, but it's also terrible for humanity. So if we can get these people and all people to come together to have a shared understanding and a shared intention to lower surface temperatures and infiltrate and retain moisture and protect and plant out and all the most endangered species, then we're going to be able to make it we're physically changing the situation and improving the situation to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So we can come to these COPs and have, discussions ad infinitum and nothing will actually change. But except maybe the money is spent here that needs to be spent on taking care of the poorest people on the planet and making sure that they're fed and that they're usefully engaged in something meaningful for humanity.
I love that, and I totally agree. I want to just, for those who don't know who John is and what he's done, he opened a CBS correspondence office in China. He was then asked by the World Bank to document the largest restoration project in the world, the Loess Plateau, for 15 years almost. You did that, and it was quite substantial.
Yeah, I was. I helped to open the CBS News Bureau as a cameraman and producer, and I worked for CBS for a decade in China, and then I worked with Italian and German television for a number of years, and I made a number of films for the BBC. But when I was asked by the World Bank to film a baseline study for the Loess Plateau Watershed Rehabilitation Project, I sort of compared what I was seeing in terms of restoration with the rise of China from poverty and isolation, or the collapse of the Soviet Union, or other big stories that I'd been covering for the news. And I realized that ecology was understood and underrepresented, and it was much more important and much more valuable. So the political things that take place, well, they kind of disappear later. It's something that's important at the moment, but after a little while, it's just another sidebar of history. But the ecology, our understanding and our actions to restore ecological systems will determine the quality of life for all life in the future. So when I understood this at about 40 years of age, I left journalism and just started studying ecology. So that's how I got to be who I am and be here.
I'm so glad that you did, and we're here at the COP asking a couple questions. The two questions I still want to ask you is, your COP half full? What's your optimistic perspective, if there is one at all? And could you just let us know, now that you've experienced COP several times, what's your takeaways, optimistic perspective?
Well, I think the most optimistic is that what some people are calling nature-based interventions or like this, that's something that has been well understood for a long time, but a lot of people didn't understand it. So now that's being discussed more widely, so that's a very good thing. And I think the relationship, when we understand that all of our problems are interrelated, so poverty or hunger or war or climate change or biodiversity loss, desertification, they're all pretty much connected. So if we answer them all at the same time, we're going to succeed. If we try to pick them off one at a time, we're going to fail. So I'm optimistic that it's moving in the right direction, but I'm not sure it's fast enough.
The last and hardest question, but you've answered it before with me, is what does a world that works for everyone look like for you?
I think that a world that works for everyone is simpler. It sees value where there's actually value. Right now we have an economy which is based on extraction, manufacturing, buying and selling, and also somehow speculation between the cost and price of things and interest-bearing debt. That's not really a very good idea. And real value is in the biodiversity and in the freshwater system and in the oxygenated atmosphere and in having a world of fertile soils with zero toxicity. So when we understand that, that's the world we need to create. We need to live the change we want to see in the world. And that's what the ecosystem restoration communities are doing. People are joining together in communities in different parts of the world, and they're showing that actually we could do this everywhere. There's no part of the world that doesn't need functional ecosystems, and there's no group of people that doesn't know that and doesn't want that. And so all we have to do is realize we don't need permission to restore the earth. We need to act. We need to work together and act.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting us inside of your ideas. It's always a pleasure to see you and get to spend time. We usually get to share a meal together. Hopefully we will again.
Well, maybe I'll see you in Germany, but
I hope so.
Okay.
1.5 Media, Innovators Magazine, Allied4Future. John Dennis Liu, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.